As always, thanks for stopping by. In today's video, we're going to take this beautiful PENN 7500SS that I purchased at a pawn shop for about $60, and we're going to completely disassemble it and then reassemble it. I'm going to show you how to do that. On the way through, I'm going to install some fast eddy bearings. I'm going to install a all carbon drag system. Now this thing came with 2 carbon washers and 1 Teflon, so we're just going to refresh the drag system and we're going to go straight carbon. And then on these older pins, the bail arm, for whatever reason, they're always corroded when I pick them up. So we're going to replace the bail arm and the bail and really make this thing look fresh. Without wasting any more of your time, let's just get right into it. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the drag knob. Set that aside, and then the spool pops off. Next, we're going to take a micro screwdriver and we're going to work out this retaining ring. Just like that. Now, it's always good practice to take out the drag washers and then lay them out in which they come out of the reel from top to bottom. Like that. That way you know how to put them back in at the end. But we're going to replace this drag system, so I'm just going to show you how to do it. All right, next I'm going to remove all this old monofilament to make sure that there's no corrosion building up behind the line. All right, I have the line removed, and to my delight, the spool is in fantastic shape. There is no corrosion behind that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take some of these Remington oil wipes, and we're just going to clean up the spool real quick. All right, so I got my spool all cleaned up. I'm super excited by how clean it is after I got all the grime off. There's like no corrosion. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the click tongue. It's just a basic flathead. All right, that pops off. And here comes the whole assembly. So you have the click tongue screw, you got your click tongue, and then there's like a little washer spacer underneath. And that looks like it has a little bit of corrosion on that, so we're gonna make sure that gets all cleaned up here. All right, so this little click tongue washer had some corrosion on it, so I just hit it with some WD-40. I'm probably just gonna let it sit. There's really nothing much we can do. It's not terrible, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw grease on that when I put it back in. I'm not too worried about it. Alright, our spool is all stripped down. We can go ahead and stash that. Next, we're going to grab our reel and we're going to twist the handle clockwise, and we're going to unscrew the handle assembly. Alright, next we're going to remove the handle pivot screw right here. Alright, there's our handle pivot screw. Here's our handle pivot collar. That slides right on off. And then here's our handle pivot. There's a lot of dirt, grime, and old grease, so we'll go ahead and clean that up right now. Alright, we got our handle collar here. We'll go ahead and clean that up. Our handle pivot screw. Alright, also make sure your handle's all good, lubricated and cleaned up. There's a lot of dirt and old grease and grime in here, so I took a paper towel, cleaned that all out, let that oil sit in there, just permeate in there. So while it's sitting there waiting for reassembly, we'll just let all that oil get in there. Cool. So we got our handle collar, our handle pivot, and then our handle pivot screw. We'll set those aside in the same compartment. Alright, next we have the open bearing cover. Screw that counterclockwise. That feels a little gritty too, so I'm going to have to clean that up a little bit. Then we have our seal washer, which is just kind of like a fabric, like oil infused, old school system to keep the water out. Now they use rubberized seals, and then there's our bearing that's exposed. So what I'm going to do with this seal washer is I'm going to freshen it up with some new grease. That'll help keep out all that moisture. Be real gentle with it, not to break it. And hopefully that will keep all the grease or water out. Just reinvigorating this little old school seal. All right, cool. I'll put these, put that aside, and I'm going to clean up this open bearing cover. I'll stash that. Then I'm going to clean up these threads here on the right side of the body. Felt a little gritty. Get all that dirt and grime out. Alright, next we're going to remove these housing cover screws. Alright, go to 3 housing cover screws, and there's that side plate. Now that's a beautiful main brass gear. That's real nice. It's excellent quality. It's like what you see in some really high-end reels these days. That's pretty dang cool to see. And you can see there that my bearing fell out. It just sits in the side plate like that. That's actually a pretty good bearing. I'll probably just keep that for spare parts, but I'm going to throw in these rubberized, sealed up fast eddy bearings. See if they're any better. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this main brass gear. Alright, I got a lot of grit and grime in these teeth, so I'm going to hit them up with some oil, loosen it up, and then we're going to take the brush. I'm going to take this brass brush. I'm just going to lightly scrape off this blue corrosion. I don't want steel, I want a metal that's like just as soft, and I'm just going to gently scrub it just to get that rust off. Alright, so I got a real butter cleaning kit. They come with these cool little like plastic Q-tips in it. So I'm going to get inside this shaft, throw some oil in there. Already got a paper towel in there as far as I could. We're just going to make sure there's no dirt or grime in there. Cool. Just rub it down. Make sure you get any last dirt. I didn't get too crazy scraping the corrosion off. Like I said, I used the brass wire brush. You can see there's a little bit of corrosion down in there, but I'm not too worried about it. We're gonna throw a ton of grease on this thing, and then it just being operated will probably knock a lot of that off. All right, so that main gear is done. Now we got these housing screws that need some love. Alright, so the housing screws are now completed. They're nice and clean. I'll put those away. Now we got the housing cover, or housing plate. Let's hit that all over. There we go. Got the housing plate, or housing cover, and put that away. Alright, next we're going to disassemble the crosswind block assembly. It's so cool with these old reels, seeing like where the technology came from. Like this crosswind block plate and these 2 screws is completely unnecessary. Now the housing that the main shaft goes into is all part of the crosswind block, and there's only 1 screw. So it's cool seeing the older obsolete technology and how it evolved. So there's 1 crosswind block screw, there's the other one. This plate comes off. Wow, that's wild. That is so cool. So I tell you what, that is not like as streamlined as the new designs, but that seems to be like way more robust. Like that is an absolute tank of a crosswind block. Like that will never fail. Alright, so now we're gonna pull this main shaft out. And it is just thick, man. This reel is a beast. Alright, I think our crosswind block should come out now, if I'm a betting man. Yep, there it goes. And you got the little cam behind it. Look at that grease. Man, that is thick. This grease is about like another decade from just absolutely solidifying. Like I've taken apart reels from the 50s and this just like turns into a cake. Alright, so we'll take this crosswind block out and we'll go ahead and clean up the crosswind block assembly. Alright, here's our crosswind block. Got some old ancient grease on it. Yeah. Alright, there's our crosswind assembly. We'll go ahead and throw that away. Not throw it away, we'll go store this and onto the next part. Alright, here we have our main shaft. We'll just wipe this down, get all the old grease and oil off of it. This thing is thick. Thick with 3 C's. Micro screwdriver, get behind it. some oil down on this. Clean that up. Yep, throw some oil underneath here, that way it doesn't ever rust again, or stops it from rusting. Put this plastic washer back on. And then once we reassemble this, we'll lube it up with some grease. Cool. Stash that. Alright, so next we have our crossline gear. I removed some of that old grease. Modern reels have a screw here which hold this in place, but that's not necessary on this old reel. So in order to get a little leverage, I'm going to take this paper towel. I'm going to grab this little cam right here. And I'll try and attempt to pull this gear off. There it goes. The gear just comes right on off. Now, if that doesn't work for you, what I would do is take needle nose, maybe wrap the needle nose with like electrical tape, or put the paper towel on this little cam and then put the needle nose over. That way you don't like scratch the heck out of this cam when you pull it off, scar it or whatever. All right, so I'm gonna clean up this crossline block, and then I'm gonna clean up all in this housing. All right, so I got the crossline gear all cleaned up. We'll stash that. I cleaned up all the old grease in the housing. Now I'm going to flip over the body, and we're going to unscrew this bearing cover. This is a closed bearing cover. Just love how robust that is. And then we'll just pop this. This bearing should pop out. That was in there thick. That was in there good. I'm going to put some WD-40 on this and then see if it'll come out. I'll be right back. Alright, so this bearing here is pretty stubborn. But what I found is you take the back of this brush with the plastic, and it popped out. Definitely stubborn. Again, one of those Chinese bearings. We'll stash that. And I'm going to clean up in this bearing housing here. Cool. So now what we're going to do is we're going to find a socket and take off this rotor nut. The bearing cover, I clean that up. We'll stash that as well. All right, next we're going to take the rotor nut off. I got a 1/2" socket. There we go. There's our rotor nut. I assume that's called a rotor nut plate. I didn't actually look it up. Oh my goodness, look at that. That is insane. I am definitely going to take a picture of this. It's been a while since I've taken apart something like this, but super cool mechanism. So cool. So now we have our rotor dismounted. We got this rotor locking plate. Let's see if we can take that out here, clean that up. There we go. So let's clean up this rotor here. That's the side, we'll address that here in a minute. Rotor nut plate, clean that up. All right, so this is a rotor washer, square washer. This is your rotor nut. Sweet. Rotor washer, rotor nut, we'll stash those. All right, so what we're looking at here is our ratchet. We have our silent dog, our transfer lever, and then our dog. And this is your upper eccentric. And this is your little cam that turns your dog on and off. So when you reel, it clicks. When you reel, it doesn't click. That's those two settings. In order to make our lives easier, take a picture of this. And that will help us reassemble. Because we have the schematic, but the schematic ain't great. All right, we're going to take our thick flathead. And we'll just take this transfer bar out. Transfer lever. That's pretty corroded, so I'm definitely going to hit this with the brush, wire brush. Cool. Now I'm going to take this silent dog out. Ooh, cool. They put a Loctite in that. So that's got a Loctite in it. I guess that's the silent dog screw. So we'll take the silent dog off. We'll pair that screw up with it so we don't lose it. We'll set that aside. Here's our ratchet. And also note the orientation of this ratchet. So I really want to note this orientation. Alright, let's take this dog out. This dog is spring loaded, so I'm going to be careful. You can see the spring on the back side. So make sure we don't lose that spring. It's got Loctite too. Alright, we'll take that dog off. And there's a spring behind it. So we'll put all these together, make sure we don't lose them. Set that aside. Cool. All right, here's our transfer lever. It's pretty crusty, so I'm gonna hit it with this brass wire brush real quick. Get this screw cleaned up as well. Stash this guy. Here's our silent dog. Be really gentle with this component here. Alright, we'll stash that. We'll lube that up and grease it later. We got the regular dog with its respective spring. There we go. We'll stash that. And here's our ratchet. Looking pretty ratchet. Alright, there's our ratchet cleaned up. We'll stash that. Alright, next we got our anti-reverse lever. Boom. There's our anti-reverse lever. Glad I took that off. It looks a little crusty. We'll set that aside. And that will push up our upper eccentric. Notice that this little spring is attached to it. And note the orientation. That's how it came out. That's how it looked right there. All right, we'll pull that out. So there's the upper eccentric with its spring. It's like aluminum. It's nice. So that's how that went, just like that. I'll go stash that. All right, next we got to remove our silent eccentric. Sweet. So it's keyed. Both are keyed, so be hard script orientation. That screw is super crusty, so we'll take a look at that. And then here's our silent eccentric. Definitely note the orientation of the spring. I'll take a picture of that real quick. Boom. Push this silent eccentric out with its spring, and we'll clean that up. All right, so I clean up the silent dog lever and the silent eccentric. Put that spring back in there, back in its hole. And we'll stash these. All right, next we're going to take off this bearing cover, or plate. All right, there's that bearing cover. I imagine my pinion pack pulls out. That is a very simple pinion pack. Oh, that's amazing. We got like a collar here, like a collar washer looking thing, and then just a straight up bearing, y'all. Simple. Back when times were simple. That's all you had. No roller clutch, no roller sleeve, bearing collar, multiple washers, no pinion bearing down here. All right, let's get this pinion gear cleaned up. Our pinion gear, our pinion spacer, the 3 bearing cover screws, and the bearing cover, so we'll go stash that. All right, looking at the top of the main body, we can look down inside the pinion housing, and there's a ton of gunk right here, which is gross. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean that up. All right, now we have a completely stripped out body. We're gonna leave that bushing cap cover in, main body, part number 1-750. Stripped down, we'll go ahead and stash that, we'll move on to the rotor. All right, next we're gonna take off the bail wire, but first we're gonna take off the bail arm. So we'll unscrew the bail arm screw. I'm using a larger flathead that's thicker. I want more surface area in here. That way I don't strip the screw. Pull that out, comes our bail arm. I believe that's the pivot arm, spring loaded. All right, so there's our bail arm, and then we'll try and get this bail wire out. All right, in order to get this bail wire out of the bail arm here, I'm gonna wrap it in paper towel. That way I don't score it. Oh, is it the line roller? Must be a washer. All right, so it looks like your bail arm has a collar around it. It just fell out, so don't lose that. So there's a little plastic collar that goes on your bail arm screw. So we'll stash that. All right, back to the bail wire. Take these pliers. There we go. Man, that's on there tight, boy. Woo! Kind of a poor design. Of course, this is gonna like rush shut, so like the only way to get it out is to like do what I'm doing, which is not ideal. All right, that should be the bail wire. Boom. All right, so the bail wire's off. Now I got a whole new assembly, but if you don't have it, we will further disassemble bail arm. So what we have here is our line roller screw. Take that line roller screw out. All right, so there's our bail arm screw. Nice and rusted. That looks like crap. All right, so there's a little washer in here. Looks like a little, is that a little lock washer? Yep. There's a little lock washer in there that's corroded. So don't lose that. That seems to be everything. There's your bail arm. Here's your like line roller washer. Here's your line roller. Now it looks like your line roller has a little bushing inside of it. Let's see here. Yeah, there's like a plastic inside the line roller. So don't screw that up. Cool, and there's your bail wire. Sweet, that's done. All right, next we're gonna access our bail arm spring, which is right there, our bail spring. And this is our bail spring cover. How simple this thing is. I'm gonna pull this plate off, and we're gonna try and note the orientation of this bail spring. Boom. All right, got evidence. All right, let's try and pull this out, see what happens. Boom. Man, what a cool, simple design. All right, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna clean this cover and this housing here. And then that's pretty much a fully disassembled reel. Cooking with gas. I got this copper brush from a gun cleaning kit. This is actually 243. I think 22 would work great too. I'm just gonna scrape out all that corrosion that was in the bail holder. All right, there we have it, fully disassembled rotor and reel. So now we're ready for assembly. All right, it's time to put our bail arm back together. So what we have here is our bail arm spring. There's a little hole right here in this corner. A little foot goes in the little hole. And then I'll take my finger and I'll press down on this spring, just like that. Make sure this left side is fully seated. It's like popped out there on me. All right. Now we have our bail arm. This is the replacement I got. And so you got a little cam there and a channel. So it's gonna go in that channel. And then there's a little hole right here. Get a picture for the close-up. Okay, got that. So what we're gonna do is that cam's gonna go in that channel and that hole is gonna marry up with that bail arm. So I'm gonna put the spring in that hole first. So the spring's gonna go in the hole in the bail arm, and then that cam's gonna go right in that channel, just like that. And then the main hole is not aligned, but we'll force it together here. Now also note that there's a little plastic collar that needs to be inside your bail arm, so don't forget about that. All right, let's put in the bail spring cover, just like that. Here's our bail spring cover screw. Put a little oil in there. Actually, let me put some oil all over that spring. While we got it open, make sure it's nice and lubed. Put that bail spring cover in. That bail spring cover screw in. Get it started with the micro. Okay. Now I'm not going to tighten it all the way because that spring is putting some back pressure on it. So I'm only going to loosely tighten that bail spring cover. And what I'm going to do is take the bail arm screw. I'm actually going to grease that up. I'm going to grease the heck out of this. Bail arm screw. Oil up the threads. What I need to do is push this bail arm down like that until the holes line up. Then I'm gonna put this screw in. Let's see if we can get that started. Yep, got it started, that's good. Now I'm gonna screw it down. Now, where the fat part of that bail arm screw meets the bushing. We're gonna better line it up this time. All right, it's in. I'm not compressing anything, it looks good. Now before that gets too tight, I'm gonna put this bail arm spring cover plate in. And we're gonna tighten that bad boy down all the way. That's in there tight. Oh shoot. There you go. I guess you don't want it too tight. Actually, we'll just do it snug. And then once we get this bail arm all the way tightened down, then we can really get that spring cover screwed down. Alright, now we can tighten this guy down some more. And there we have it. That looks promising to me. Alright, now we're going to install our bail wire to the bail holder. Note the orientation of the bail. This little line roller is facing upwards. I'm going to put some oil in these threads. I'm going to screw it in. Throw some more oil right here. I'm just gonna hand tight it as hard as I can and call it good. I don't want to get too buck wild on it. Cool, then we have a line roller collar, a friction washer, and our line roller screw, and then the line roller. Now my line roller has a little plastic bushing in the middle. I couldn't get it to come out, so you probably don't have to worry too much about it disappearing. So anyways, we're gonna put some grease on our line roller shaft. I'll put a good amount. Throw our line roller on there. Some might argue that should be oil, but you know what? I think it's gonna work. Alright, I'm gonna put some oil for the line roller screw lock washer. Alright, so that lock washer is gonna go in just like that. Line roller screw, it's gonna press in. Then we're gonna take our line roller collar. That will go on the screw like that. They line up. Get it started with the micro. Just get it started with the micro. And then finish it off with the real one, the real screw. Tighten that up. Don't get too crazy. Oh, it might have been a little too tight. I don't want to get too wild. There we go. And that line roller is moving. Nice. So now we have our line roller. It's rolling around. Bail arm goes up and down. So our rotor's looking pretty good. All right, next step, we're gonna put our pinion pack together. We'll use one of these new fast eddy bearings. Hopefully they sent me the right size. All right, here's our pinion gear. We're gonna put a ton of grease on it. Put our bearing on. Nice, perfect fit. Move that thing up big time. Up the threads. Make sure this thing's covered in oil. Take our pinion spacer, throw that on. That's covered in oil as well. And we're going to take grease, put it all in the housing here. And there's our pinion pack. Our pinion pack goes on. Nice fit. Now we're going to put our bearing plate or bearing cover on. Note the orientation. One hole goes up to the upper left, 2 holes the bottom right. There are little screws in there. Go too tight, don't want to strip them. Nice. And then our penny pack's installed. All right, next up we're gonna install the silent eccentric. Just a little device here, aluminum material. So we'll grease that up. Put a little bit of grease in its channel. So that goes in like that. All right, but before we do that, so we got to put our spring in. So there's a little hole on the back side of this eccentric. That spring, a little foot goes right in that hole, and that's the orientation you're looking for. Take this micro screwdriver, just lock it into place. Flip it around. I'll put the lever back in. Now, the eccentric and the lever are keyed, so it's kind of hard to mess up the orientation. Put that in there. Get it started with the micro. We'll finish it up with the proper. See, that's big enough. Yep, that works. I don't go too tight on it, but that's it. All right, using my picture on my phone to help facilitate this, I'm going to install my upper eccentric. That's this bar here with a little cam thing up top. Before we do that, I'm going to put a little grease in this hole behind it, and hopefully that'll help hold the spring in place for ultimate placement. So here's the upper eccentric spring. I'm going to place that in the hole just like that. That's what it looks like. And I'm looking at my picture here on my camera, and that's going to make sense once it goes in. I'm going to grease this all up, so keep that corrosion at bay. This is aluminum, so this probably wouldn't rust at all, but it doesn't hurt. Give everything a boundary layer. Cool. All right. So note the orientation that this goes in. So you have 2 cams, you got one up top and one on the bottom. The smaller one goes on the bottom. I'm going to throw some more grease in here. And the bottom. Okay, so big one goes on top. And that just slides in like that. The other side of the spring, I'm going to twist it a little bit. Maybe it'll help this go in. It's going to go in that little spot right there. Now we're locked in. Go ahead and screw it down. So the anti-reverse lever is keyed, so it pairs up. With the shaft there, the upper eccentric shaft. We had started with the micro. Tighten it down just a little bit. And I'm going to check the functionality. I'm a little concerned about that spring placement. It's so easy to strip these little screws out. All right, so there we go. It's in. That looks good. And that's how you install that. Tighten this down just a little bit more. I do not want to strip it. All right, that's good. There you go. Upper eccentric. That's what turns your anti-reverse on and off, something that's unique to the older reels. All right, next we're going to install our dog. So we got our dog lever, dog screw, and the dog spring. Now I'll show you on the screen, but this is an example where I took a picture of the reel before I disassembled it, and the spring appeared to be installed wrong. So I'm going to show you how I think it's supposed to be done correctly. Because this hole here obviously is for this little foot on the spring to be inserted to, and then on the original image it was parked to the right here. Now there's obviously no lost functionality that way, but I'm pretty sure it needs to go in this hole, and I just tested it out earlier and it works. So we're going to lube up this screw. Since all these components have a little bit of corrosion, I'm just really going to coat them down with grease, and that way it'll like halt that process. I'm going to put a little bit of oil in here, actually a lot of bit of oil. I'm going to completely cover this dog lever in grease. Get it all saturated. And on the back side, I'm going to put a good amount of grease. And that's going to act like a temporary glue. It'll hold my spring in place. So we're going to put that spring in. Just like that. So I'm going to do something like that. And let's see if this works here. So this little foot here, this flat foot, needs to go in front of this little structure right here. So I'm going to start the threads right here. So the top of the dog lever needs to be underneath this little cam. This flat foot here needs to come in front of that structure. My other foot is still inside the dog lever, so that's good. So let's try and get lucky here and screw it all down. All right, take our flathead and we'll screw this down. I don't want to tighten it too tight. And there you have it. Dog lever will move back and forth just like that. All right, next we're going to install our transfer lever. Put some oil right here. I'm going to cover this transfer lever in grease. Help slow down or stop that corrosion. I scraped it down with the brass brush as much as I could. Cover the screw with grease. All right, looking at the top of the reel here. The transfer bar is going to go like this. So that super curved part is going to like hug the top of the dog. We put our screw in. See if I can hold this and do this. There we go. Take the micro, get it started. Lined up, grease in there. All good, lubed up. Just like that. I'll tighten that down. Sweet. I've got our transfer lever. All right, next we're going to install our silent dog. First, I'm going to throw some grease on it, just like all the other levers. Make sure that screw is all covered. Put some oil down in the hole, that way it doesn't rust. And we're gonna need our ratchet. Here's our ratchet. I took the wire brush to that as well. So we're gonna throw some grease on that bad boy. Okay. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna slide them together like that. A lot of grease is nice because it acts as a temporary glue, it just holds everything together. Now I'm just gonna slide that dog down over its respective hole, just like that. I'll put the silent dog screw in. Make sure it's aligned and it screws down. Stops screwing down, and obviously it's not aligned with the thick part of the screw, basically the thick part of the shaft. I'm not going to reef it down too much. That's kind of the vibe we're going for right there. And that looks just like the image I took before I took it apart. Okay, let's move on. With our ratchet equally spaced around the pinion here, what we're going to do is look at the form factor on the back of the rotor, that hexagon, and we're going to try and align to the best of our ability the points with what's on the ratchet. And we're going to very, well, I got it on the first try. So anyways, it seated perfectly on that go, of course. But if it doesn't, what you do is you kind of, I'm going to intentionally do it. So there I can tell by the top of the pinion here in the threads that it's not seated. So I'm just going to gently rotate it around. There we go, until it falls down even further, and then give it a good spin. The anti-reverse is working good. Look at that. So I know it's on. All right, next we're gonna take our rotor nut, and we'll call it the rotor nut washer. We'll cover that in thin layer of grease. All right, so now I'm gonna look on top of the rotor. I'm gonna put that rotor washer right on top. And notice that the pinion gear is keyed itself, so grab that pinion gear and twist it around so that it matches with the key of the rotor washer. Then we're going to take our rotor nut, twist that on. Primitive, but nice and simple. Cool. So now we got our 1/2 inch socket. We're just going to gently tighten it. Make sure we're not stripping threads. I feel like it's good. And now we're ready to tighten it home. Don't get too wild with it, because that's steel versus brass, so don't want to strip it. And there we go. All right, at this point it's smart to test your anti-reverse, so that's working. Just going around that ratchet and catching it, which is good. We'll turn it off, it turns off. And then we have our clicker, turns on and off. So it looks like we assembled it correctly. All right, next we're going to install our right housing bearing, and we got our closed bearing cover that I cleaned up earlier. So I'm going to put grease on the outside of this bearing. I'm going to put a little grease in here. All right, let's see if Fast Eddie fits. Oh, that's a tight fit. All right, so I use the back of this wire brush, the plastic. I put equal force on it and then pressed it down. And that was a pain. The OG was a pain to get out as well. So I'm gonna hit that with a little bit of oil inside there. And that bearing cover, go right on, just like that. Just like that. It just has to be hand tight. All right, next we're gonna install our crosswind system. What we're looking at here is our crosswind block plate, 2 screws, and then the crosswind gear. First thing in is the crosswind gear. I want to put a healthy amount of grease on this thing. Just like that. And I got it completely covered. All right, and then it goes right on that little shaft right there. So we're just gonna place it in, and there is no screw or anything, so it just sits right there. It goes around and around, just like that. And we'll put that cam at top dead center. All right, we're gonna take our crosswind block, cover those holes in grease. This whole channel, I'm gonna put a good amount of grease in. All right, this is the orientation of the crosswind block. Here's that little cam. That little cam right there is gonna go inside of that channel. So, just like that. And we can like rotate it down by turning the crosswind gear. Sweet. All right, next we're gonna take our main gear, big beautiful gear, and we're gonna just hose this thing down. Like I said, this thing has no sealing, modern reels, so my humble opinion, more grease the merrier. Now, if I were to set this reel down for 30 years and never touch it, then of course this grease is gonna harden up, and that's what you see in like really old reels. But in the short term, you're good to go, as long as you stay on top of the maintenance. A bunch of grease is no problem. All right, so that's greased up. Throw some oil down the center, keep them threads happy, and the interface with the bearings. All right, so now this top of the shaft is going to go inside of your housing bearing there. we're going to make sure the teeth are nice and lined with the pinion, which they are. And our, I'm going to bring this crosswind block, and I'm just going to wind down these gears just a little bit. Oh, actually, I just turned the rotor, and that crosswind block just comes down. All right, let's get our main shaft. All right, here's our main shaft. We just installed our main gear down there. I'm going to put a healthy amount of grease on this as well, help halt any of that corrosion. Make sure the back of this washer, I think I put a bunch of oil down in there already. Just make sure. And now that will go right in this hole on top of your rotor. So main shaft down in the hole. This flat cutout needs to be facing towards you, and that's going to slide into your crosswind block, and there it goes right there. Then we'll redo that to emphasize. So there's your main shaft sliding down, and that cutout lines up perfectly with your crosswind block. Now we're going to take our crosswind plate. That has some corrosion on it, so I'm going to completely cover that. Just like that. So that shaft lined up with the cutout. Just install that crosswind block plate. Put our 2 screws in there. Just like that. So now we got our 2 screws. Line this one up a little better. There we go. All right, now we're going to change our attachment head to one that fits perfectly. We'll tighten these down. I don't want to go too hard on them. I don't want to strip them. And there you have it. Now to check functionality, we just twist that rotor, and you see that crosswind block's going up and down. Nice. All right, next we're going to install the housing cover and its respective screws. So all we got to do, I'll throw some oil down in these threads. Take our housing cover, just goes right over like that. Take the housing screws, let's get them seated. I'm going to put some oil on all of them so the threads get oiled up. And we're going to use this micro just to get them started. Okay. Now we're going to grab the fat attachment and we're going to tighten these. All right, housing covered installed. All right, now I'm going to install my last bearing. Now we're going to take our open-faced bearing cover. It's going to screw right on. Hand tight, snug. Then we're going to take our seal washer, fabric, oil-infused washer. Put that in. That's going to help protect our bearing. All right, next we're going to assemble our handle assemblies. We got our handle, handle collar, handle pivot, and handle pivot screw. So what we're going to do is take this handle collar goes this way, just like that. Now we're going to put our handle on, flip it over, make sure our holes are somewhat aligned, and then that pivot screw goes right in. We'll take our micro. There you go. We have an assembled handle. Now we just take our reel, put that in. You can tell this thing is like super greasy right now, and I'm gonna wipe it all down at the end. Boom. And there we have our handle. Cool. Next thing will be the spool. All right, the next thing we're gonna install is the click tongue and its spring and screw. So what I'm gonna do is put some grease on this component here. That's actually called 48A, the click tongue washer. So we're gonna put some grease on this click tongue washer. Wipe the mouthful. That's the orientation you're looking for. And you want the loop of the spring or the hook of the spring be facing that way, like down on the click tongue. All right, so we're gonna wrap it around. Put the screw through the washer, line it up with the hole. Get it started with the micro. And this should work. Phillips, micro Phillips. Oh, that worked. There you go. So you have your click tongue, the screw, the washer underneath, and the spring, just like that. And I'll get an up-close picture and show you what it looks like up close. Throw some oil in that spring, make sure it doesn't corrode. All right, next we're going to install the drag system. Now, before I put these in, I covered them with a thin layer of grease, especially with these older reels where there's no like sealed drag knob, so water will just go right in here. I think it's good to have a decent amount of grease in there. Okay, so the first washer is an octagon, second washer is carbon, next washer is a keyed metal washer, followed by a carbon, another octagon, a carbon, and then we'll finish it off with a keyed washer, just like that. And then here's the retaining ring. This one's not very tight, so you can just push it in by hand. And there you have it. Drag system is installed. I'm just going to put a bead of grease around the outside, just like that. Help keep that water intrusion out. And there you have it. All right, now that our drag system is installed, we'll go ahead and clean up some of this grease off of the spool. Now I know there's some concerns if you read like old texts, old manuals from back in the day. They didn't want you putting grease on the drag washers, but I think that was like an older, maybe Teflon plastic material. With the carbon drag washers, I always oil mine up, and it helps keep the water out and helps keep them from rusting to the metal ones, and I haven't noticed any degradation in performance. So, and I've noticed too, when the new pins come from the factory, there's usually a good amount of grease in the drag system. All right, so we just twist that spool on to the main shaft, and we'll just take our drag knob here, just like that. It's looking a little dry, so I'm going to put a little bit of oil down in this drag knob. That way it's some level of protection from the elements. Just like this. Now we're ready. So now that drag knob just goes right on top of the threads of the main shaft, and it tightens down. Now we have a fully assembled reel. So we're going to tighten down that drag. It's getting tighter, harder to turn the spool, good sign. Loosen it up. Alright, drag system appears to be working. I'll check the reel functionality. And anti-reverse is working just fine. Now we'll check the bail. That's working great. Clicker. Anti-reverse off. Reverse, anti-reverse back on. Clicker off. And there we have it. A fully serviced and slightly upgraded PENN 7500SS from a pawn shop. That thing is just beautiful. A classic. A complete workhorse. So this was $60 at a pawn shop, and then I spent maybe like $30 on upgrades. So a sub $100 reel, but this is a ton of capability. I mean, something people are overlooking is, you know, instead of buying a brand new cheap reel, you know, from Walmart or Bass Pro that's made overseas, you can go buy an American-made reel and just give a little TLC, and you have a far more capable reel. Now the ergonomics are outdated and whatnot, but at the end of the day, this thing catches fish. As always, thanks for stopping by. I hope this video was helpful to you, and I look forward to putting out more videos. Make sure you get out and go fish, and we'll see you all later. Bye.